principles, practice and perfection. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he taught everything in terms of principles, practice and perfection. It means, what are the truths, the eternal truths underlying our existence, and what is the perfection, the ultimate goal, and what is the process based on those principles which takes us to the goal. These three basic principles. Sambandha, that means relationship and facts. Abhideya, that's the process. And prayojan means the final goal. For example, if you've got a car, to some extent you have to know how it works. You know that it needs petrol to provide the energy, and it needs electricity to spark, to ignite the petrol. You need water to put in the radiator to cool it, and you need air in the tires. That much at least you have to know how it works. And then gradually when you drive, you learn how to use the steering wheel, the brakes, the gears, the accelerator, and so on. You learn more details. So if you practice according to those principles, then you'll be able to get where you want to get. If you get somewhere else, it may mean that you didn't know where you wanted to go in the first place. You didn't have a clear goal. So we have to have a clear goal. And if the car stops running suddenly, that probably means that maybe you didn't put any petrol in, or the battery's flat, or it's overheated, whatever. In other words, you're ignoring some basic principles. So bhakti in the same way, we have to know to some extent how bhakti works. At first, very, very, very basic. And then gradually more details about the principles, and we link that up with the process, and we understand better how the process works, and how to practice more consistently, more effectively. And also, a clear understanding, really what is the goal. We talk about loving service to Krishna, but really what is loving service to Krishna? Gradually we'll understand that more and more clearly and more deeply. Basic principles. Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojan. The basic principles. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he met with Sanatana Goswami in Varanasi. He'd just come back from Vrindavan. First of all, he met with Srila Rupa Goswami in Prayag. And then coming on further, so he met with Sanatana Goswami. Srila Sanatana Goswami is extremely intelligent. He was also a very elevated devotee already. He was born in a Brahmana family, a Vaishnava family, and then somehow or other he was forced to serve the Muslims. So although he regarded himself as very fallen, he was extremely humble. He was extremely intelligent, very, very elevated. But anyway, when he met with Sanatana Goswami, with Lord Chaitanya, he asked 4 questions. He said this, I don't understand. Who am I? Why am I suffering? What's the goal of life? And what is the process for attaining this goal of life? So these 4 questions are really basic. We have to understand what the goal is. This is one very important. Very important. I've explained. There's material enjoyment, there's liberation, and there's bhakti. These are 3 main goals in the material world. And bhakti produces love, and bhakti, the actual process of bhakti itself is love. So it's not different. With work, you work until you get the result and then you stop working. Liberation, you practice, and when you're liberated, you stop practicing. But with bhakti, you practice bhakti, and when you have pure bhakti, one glorious day, we'll actually be with Krishna in the spiritual world. We won't stop bhakti. We'll be doing it more and more and more and more. So, practice, what are the 2 qualities of practice? The first is, it should be causeless. Like the inhabitants of Braj, Vrindavan. When they had Govardhan Puja, they were worshipping Govardhan, Krishna had made an arrangement to offend Indra and to show that there was no need to worship the demigods in Vrindavan. Why should they worship the demigods? The inhabitants of Braj are so much more elevated. They're so much more elevated than the Brajvasis. So why should the Brajvasis worship the demigods? Krishna couldn't tolerate that. So he made an arrangement. They worshipped Govardhan. And then Krishna himself expanded himself, and he sat on top of Govardhan as a huge form. And all the inhabitants, they were offering mountains and mountains, unquote, mountains to this form of Govardhan. And Govardhan was pleased, and he said, what would you like? Triptosmi. So they just said, we just want that Krishna will be happy. That's all. They didn't want anything else. They weren't serving Krishna in order to get something. They weren't even serving Krishna because they knew, oh, he's the Supreme Personality Godhead, we have to serve him, that's our business. They're just totally attracted to his beautiful qualities, and they just want to make him happy. That's all. Pure love, causeless. And uninterrupted. Nothing could stop their service. Even when Krishna left Vrindavan, he went to Mathura, he went to Dwarka, he married 16,108 queens, he had 10 children, 11 children with each of them, and then they all had children. So his father, grandfather. For an ordinary person, that would be, okay, enough's enough. But the gopis, the Brajbasis, they just continued their loving service to Krishna. They never stopped. It increased more and more. So the goal, this is the goal. We have to understand what is the process. We understand what is the goal. The goal is love. Many people think, well, the goal is, you go back to the spiritual world. And of course we want to go back to the spiritual world. We want to be with Krishna in the spiritual world. But the final goal is love. And we should understand why that is. If we love Krishna completely, then going back to the spiritual world is automatically included. But the goal is, actually, it's selfless love. It's love for Krishna without any desire for oneself at all. So even wanting to go back to the spiritual world, that's also a desire. Whereas simply to serve Krishna for his own happiness, that's not a desire. So then the question arises, well, why should I want that kind of goal? Why do I have to want selfless love? I want to go back to the spiritual world and have fun. The goal is love, a loving relationship with Krishna. And the more selfless the devotee is, the closer the relationship with Krishna. So for example, in the spiritual world, in Vaikuntha, so they all know that Krishna is the Supreme Lord, and therefore their relationship with Krishna is somewhat limited. He doesn't have mum and dad in Vaikuntha. Narayan doesn't have mum and dad. He doesn't have friends. He can't have a picnic in the forest. It's not there. So even in Dwarka, they know that he's the Supreme Lord. He has father and mother, he has children, but they know that he's the Supreme Lord, and that also limits their relationship. When Krishna had a headache, and he wanted the dust from the lotus feet of his devotees to put on his head, all the inhabitants of Dwarka, all of them, including his mother and father, they said, we can't do that, because that's an offense. He's the Supreme Personality Godhead, we can't do that. So Narada Muni went to Vrindavan and he told the gopis, and they said, yes, 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 you take all the dust you want. So he said, you'll go to hell. They said, we're already going to hell. We've given up all of our duties, all of our female qualities, our family attachments, everything, to love Krishna. Anyway, we don't care. Let us go to hell, so long as Krishna's happy, so long as his headaches removed. So this is love. They don't want anything for themselves at all. So we have to understand what's the practice of bhakti, and understand that it's in relation with Krishna and with Guru and Vaishnavas. And then practice, so we need to know what are the essential practices in bhakti, understanding that that's activities from the spiritual world. In the spiritual world, when Krishna comes home at night, so Mother Yashoda is offering arati. It removes the inauspiciousness. They're feeding him. Though the kinds of services that we offer to the deity, they're offered to Krishna in the spiritual world. But they're doing it in their spiritual body. It's a perfect expression of their desire to serve Krishna and please him. We're practicing with the material body. But as we practice, some moods come. At first we're offering like chunks. Offering food, offering incense, offering ghee lamps, and these things. We're offering nice things to Krishna. Krishna doesn't need our nice things. He's got lots of nice things in the spiritual world. What he's really after is the mood with which we're offering. He wants our heart. So the arati, it's not a ritual actually. It's a symbolic expression of offering oneself, like a lamp. Lamp is light, like the soul is light. So offering arti is like, it's like offering the self. And as the more one actually offers with love, so the more that actually that becomes a real offering. So at first offering things, then gradually the mood is coming, and finally, not finally, but one day actually the spiritual body will begin to manifest, and we'll offer more and more with spiritual mood, and then finally really in the spiritual body. But at first we're practicing automatically for our own pleasure, and then gradually this spontaneous mood develops. So the perfection, what's the perfection? The perfection is to serve Krishna and his associates in the spiritual world. At first this seems very distant. We know, Gurudev has told us that final goal, what? Radhapalya Dasa. To serve the pastimes of Radha and Krishna and Braj. Okay. It seems a long way away. And it's so far away that it's difficult to pick up, a real enthusiasm, a real eagerness. So what is that goal? Many devotees are bothered by the fact that the goal seems so distant, so unattainable. Well, what am I supposed to be doing now? I can't relate to that. The goal is really simple. We have to engage in this process. The process itself is pleasurable. So we engage in the process, develop our affection and our attachment, and keep going. That's it. It's really simple. That is the goal. Because once we're engaged in this process, we'll feel so happy and satisfied. And whether it takes a short time or a long time, it doesn't matter, because the more we progress, the more satisfying and fulfilling it becomes. What is the problem? Pratyakshavagamang dharmam susukam kartamavya. It's directly we realize, as we practice bhakti, so directly we realize the spiritual nature of the self. And susukam kartamavya is joyfully performed. So what is the problem? This is our goal, is to start the practice, develop more love and affection, and just keep going. And we have to know how to keep going, how to practice, and how to keep going. We should also understand one of the big obstacles is offenses. If we don't know what is devotional service, we don't know how to act in relationship with Krishna and in relationship with devotees, then we'll commit what are called offenses. And these slow us down. Just like in relationships, if we commit offenses to the other person, then it affects the relationship. So similarly, when we commit offenses in devotional service, that affects our devotional service, it affects our taste for devotional service, it affects how we can make progress. So we need to understand what are the offenses, and we need to avoid them. And we need to associate with devotees, consult with them, keep working, not like mindless robots, but we take advice from them and understand the process more, serving them, helping them, and getting help from them. So this is the basic, what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught. Principles, practice, and perfection. And if we understand the principles, and if we practice in this way, we'll feel ourselves to be advancing. It's not just a theoretical thing, pie in the sky, go to heaven when you die. Right now, Bhakti Yoga means meeting. It means meeting with the Supreme. So if we practice like that, we will get this sense, we'll get this experience. And if we're not getting that, then we have to consult with more experienced devotees. Sometimes we think, I'm not making any advancement. I remember once the Russian devotees, they said to Gurudev, oh, Shri Gurudev, we're not making any advancement. Gurudev said, you don't see, but I see. That's one thing. But another thing is that, maybe something is wrong. Maybe we're not dealing with devotees nicely, and we need some advice, and we need some help from more experienced devotees to explain. But anyway, so if we progress like this, understand the principles, practice in accordance with the principles, and we will get the